I'm gonna play Call of Duty, and I'm gonna summarize the Jed Mckenna enlightenment trilogy, because I've spent enough time on those books, and because it will be kind of fun. Also, it's kind of a funny thing to do because very few people have read those books, and the people that have read those books are old, so it's like they're not going to be used to seeing Call of Duty type stuff. I don't even remember how I found Jed McKenna. It was like the whole enlightenment niche is like a weird thing to be getting into on the internet, but it's just so happens that I got into it. Actually, if you want to know the truth, I got into it because I saw a video by Sam Hyde before he got famous. It was a video with like 200 views, and it was about outcome independence, and he was talking about how it's almost like Buddhist. And then it was like, well, maybe I should go look into that. And that started a whole cycle of shit. But a 2-year deal. But to get started on the summary, so the first book, you know, it starts out, he's talking to somebody. I know how the beginning starts. He's like talking to somebody about enlightenment, and they're trying to talk about it, and she's all confused about what exactly it is, and she's talking about bliss, and then he's like, I think that's how it starts. She just has misconceptions, and she's talking about the Bhagavad Gita, and he's like, they're clarifying things, and she has misconceptions about enlightenment and stuff. And that's kind of what the trilogy is it's like kind of a response to the misconceptions about enlightenment and the McDonaldization of it, or the, I don't know, the weird capitalistic sales term that enlightenment has become. And you know, that first book is, you're introduced to who Jed is, and then you're introduced to his situation where they've got like a thing going on in Iowa. You know, they've got a house. They got the one person, I don't remember her name, I think it might have been Sonia, I'll call her Sonia. Sonia's kind of running the house, and she's not really devoted to Jed, but she's devoted to like Krishna. At one point Jed says she would probably kill him if Krishna asked her to. Because she's that devoted, and she just works really hard making improvements to things. So Jed just kind of stands by. And then there's people in the house, and they ask Jed questions sometimes, but there's kind of a rhythm to the way things go day to day. There's like a time for questions and stuff. And so there's a number of side plots. For example, Jed has a whole thing on skydiving, and he like talks about that and how he almost died skydiving and how it was a thrill and how it was awesome because he's like not averse to death. And then you got the philosophical component of the book, where it's like pretty much the idea is no belief is true, challenge your beliefs, find out what's true, think for yourself. And then this is kind of more of an undertaking than I thought it was going to be when I started this, but I'm in this deep, so I'll keep going and I'll finish this video. You know, there's a young woman that he kind of like teaches enlightenment stuff to, who was like thought that enlightenment was like buying a Zen book, you know. So she had met somebody who was selling a Zen book at like a seminar or something, and he explains all the bullshit of that. And then at the end of the book, there's there's an interview with a woman who works for an enlightenment magazine, and I've listened to that that last hour quite a lot. And it's an interesting bit, because he's like he explains the whole deal, a lot of the basis of the philosophy that he has as far as the ego, how no self is true self, and how it's all bullshit, and how the magazine is bullshit, and how everything is an act, and it's really deep shit. Death, sense of self, the prolonging of the sense of self. Ugh, it's making me almost... It's like a trip. Reading that book, it's like a... You've been talking about it. It's kind of like a mushroom trip. And, you know, if you're not ready for that shit, it can hurt. I don't know. I have kind of a headache. I don't think I'm going to summarize the other two books too much. But I'll give it a very lazy whirl. The second book was my least favorite, and he gets really into Moby Dick. Moby Dick. I think, you know, the whale. He's like, this is the greatest spiritual book of all time, and it's misinterpreted. It's about enlightenment. It's like, okay. So he like lives in this area and he does all that, and then there's this actually an interesting part of it, is the spiritual autolysis of it throughout the book. Julie is, I think, the reporter from the last book. She's doing this spiritual autolysis where she's writing all this shit. She's writing a bunch and contemplating a bunch. She's really going through a serious enlightenment process where she's alone and she's writing and stuff, and reflecting. And she's writing to Jed, but I don't know if Jed reads it or not. Pretty much the idea is it does, and Jed doesn't respond. The idea is that you're supposed to write as if you're writing to somebody to facilitate the process of the contemplation and the spiritual autolysis process. And so that's kind of a fun look at the process of it, because in the first book you're looking at what it's like for somebody who's enlightened. The second book you're looking at the process. And then in the third book, so that was, okay, so the first one is spiritual enlightenment, the damnedest thing. You know, the second one is spiritually incorrect enlightenment. And then the third one, spiritual warfare, and spiritual warfare is the most fun one, and it's the longest one. And what's fun about it is it focuses kind of on manifestation and human adulthood, like just maturity stuff, and like good functioning, which is like what is interesting to an ego. And he covers all sorts of media, and it's a really fun book. I think he's in Mexico in the whole book too. And I don't know, it starts out with him like there's cops and it looks like he's in a drug deal even though he wasn't, so then he runs from the cops just to entertain himself. And it's like the cops get him and they're like, you don't even have any drugs, why did you run? And he's like, I was having fun. They're like, you're crazy. And he's like, I guess. But it's that kind of like thing that gives you kind of an idea of how an enlightened person would act, I suppose. And in that book, he deals with a group and he lives with like Julie and her daughter, I think. And or maybe somebody else. No, it's somebody else. Anyway, somebody and their daughter. And the woman with the daughter. Interesting how Jed's always interacting with women, by the way, throughout the books. But in the dealings with this woman and the daughter, the woman she like had some kind of a, it's kind of a symbolic there. She had a realization about the way she was living. She just couldn't stand it. And it was like she saw a picture of like somebody standing before jumping in the 9/11 towers. And she printed it and put it up because it was like so impactful. And it made her realize she's got to shape up. And that book focuses on like the fact that you're going to die. You know, what do you want to do really? Getting real, you know. The whole book series is about getting real. But then, so he's dealing with her and that like human adulthood process, and then, which isn't as, it's like maturity instead of like full-blown truth realization. It's like kind of a different deal. And then he's dealing with this group of people that are learning to be enlightened, and there's this woman named Brett who is leading this thing, and Jed meets her, and apparently she's enlightened, and everyone's always stupid, and eventually she gives up on trying to teach them anything, and she dies. And then Jed goes to the funeral, and Jed gives this great speech on how everything about Brett was fake. In a way. I don't know. And it was impactful and cool. But he was talking to like retards essentially. Because they pretty much haven't got a clue. And then one of the guys wrote his own spiritual book loaded with like bullshit, and Jed told them like, this is bullshit, but hey, it might sell. So kind of a showing of the capitalistic business of enlightenment, and there's a lot of that. He never directly mentions Eckhart Tolle, but I feel like a lot of the book series is kind of like anti-Eckhart Tolle, because Eckhart Tolle is like super rich. And Jed probably wouldn't consider him very valid, because Jed is more nihilistic. But, you know, you get to a point where all these people are just fucking like people. And the idea that you're going to put anybody ahead of you is ridiculous. And he talks about the idea that eventually you realize that you pass some of your teachers as far as knowledge. You know, I kind of understand that. Because it's like, whether you pass them in knowledge or not, at the very least, I know that like what they say doesn't matter as much, because they're just people. They can only help so much, and they're not better than me, or they don't know more than me. Like, a lot of it, what it comes down to is a baby is pretty much enlightened. For a while I was wondering about that, and then the answer is yes. Pretty much. The unprogrammed state. You know.
Confirmed.
It's all kind of a nasty business, though. In a way, the whole being alive thing, because you just are constantly trying to stay alive. But your body does a good job of doing that through impulses. But then eventually it does a bad job and dies. So anyway, there you go. I pretty much covered the entire trilogy there, so I guess I finally did it. I was thinking about making a video about Jed for a while, and then now I finally have done it. So mission accomplished. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe and comment. Like, genuinely comment. Comment what you thought. Leave a comment. I will likely respond. Like 90% chance I'll respond to any comments. So, thanks for
The mission is half complete.
watching and
Stay
good
sharp.
luck and stuff.